Welcome back to the deep dive. I was walking through the supermarket the other day, just looking at the cereal aisle, and I was just overwhelmed. There were honestly 50, maybe 60 different types of flakes and puffs and granolas. It was just classic decision paralysis.
The paradox of choice, yeah.
Exactly. But today, we are looking at a marketplace that makes that cereal aisle look like, well, a complete joke. We are looking at the global marketplace of ideas, specifically religious worldviews. And looking at the source material you brought in, the sheer scale of this it's absolutely massive.
It is an incredibly crowded shelf, to use your analogy. It's not just a few options.
I think most people, if you ask them off the street, they probably guess there are, maybe a dozen major religions in the world, the big ones you hear about on the news. But the data says something completely different.
Oh, the data is staggering. The sources point out that there are currently over 4,000 distinctive religions being practiced around the world right now.
4,000.
4,000. 4,000 different attempts, really, to answer that fundamental question. What is all of this? Why are we even here?
That's a lot of noise. That's a lot of conflicting signals. But, much like the tech sector, where you have thousands of little startups, but really only a few big tech giants, the religious market share it's heavily consolidated. The sources highlight what they call the big four.
Right. And you have to look at it that way. If you're just a demographic analyst, you can't ignore the consolidation. These four groups, they dominate about 75% of the entire human population.
Yeah.
So just think about that. 3 out of every 4 people on Earth subscribe to one of these 4 models.
Okay, so let's break those down just to give us a sense of the scale we're dealing with. Who is sitting at the top of that leaderboard?
Well, currently you've got Christianity in first place. That's roughly 2.1 billion adherents. Then, right on its heels, and this is a key point, you have Islam in second place with approximately 1.9 billion.
And the source notes something really interesting about the trajectory here. It's not static. It mentions that Islam is the fastest growing major religion.
Yes, that's crucial. The demographic trends and, all the projections suggest that Islam could potentially flip that #1 spot. We could see it become the largest religion within the next 50 years or so. It's a massive demographic shift.
Wow. Okay, so that's 1 and 2. Who else is in the big four?
Then, rounding out the top 4, you have Hinduism with about 1 billion people, and that's largely concentrated in South Asia, of course. And then you have Buddhism with around 300 million.
I think it's really important to pause here for a second because, at least living in the West, we are so used to hearing the phrase Judeo-Christian. It links the two together so tightly that you'd naturally assume they're comparable in size. But the numbers, they tell a very different story when it comes to Judaism.
They really do. And it's a matter of influence versus scale. Historically, theologically, culturally, Judaism's influence is just immeasurable. I mean, it is the foundation for both Christianity and Islam. But demographically, it's not even in the top 5.
Where does it rank?
It's in 7th place globally. We're talking about roughly 14 million people. So you're comparing 14 million to billions. It's a completely different order of magnitude. The influence is vast, but the number of adherents is small.
So, okay, we have this massive landscape, 4,000 options, a few giants dominating the field. And the source material poses this very direct, almost consumerist question. With 4,000 options on the shelf, why choose Islam? Why is that the right product?
It's the ultimate question, isn't it? It's the question every seeker asks. Why buy this one instead of the 3,999 others?
And this is the pivot that makes this whole deep dive so interesting. The source argues that you actually cannot answer that question yet. If you start with why Islam, you've fundamentally skipped a step, a critical one.
You've skipped the most important step. It's like asking, why should I buy this car? Before you even know if it's a sports car or a minivan. You can't assess the value of a product if you don't understand its function. And so the source argues we need to stop looking at Islam as just a set of rituals. Don't eat pork, pray 5 times a day, wear a headscarf, and start looking at it as a model.
A model for what? A model for explaining reality.
Exactly. Think of it like a physics theory or a software architecture. It's a structural framework.
Yeah.
And it's designed to solve very specific problems. If the model itself doesn't work, if it's flawed, then all the rituals in the world are just empty motions.
Yeah.
So today, we aren't doing a sermon. We are definitely not preaching.
No, this is a structural analysis. We're going to tear down the engine and see how all the parts fit together. And the source suggests that for any civilization, any religion, any worldview to be considered valid, it absolutely has to provide satisfactory answers to 3 specific questions, the big 3.
These are the big ones. These are the questions that, quite frankly, keep you awake at 3:00 a.m. Number one, the origin. How did this all begin? How did the sequence start? And I don't just mean the Big Bang. I mean the moment before that. What set the dominoes up in the first place?
Okay, origin. What's number 2?
Number two, the end. What happens when the screen goes black, when you die? Is it just a void? Is there a sequel? Is it game over?
And number 3, the one we're all living in.
Exactly. The purpose. Why are we here in the middle? What is the function of this life, this experience, between the start and the finish?
Origin and purpose. It sounds simple enough to ask, but the source points out this massive epistemological problem right out of the gate. It says we immediately hit a wall, a time wall.
This is where the source gets really philosophical, and I find this part fascinating. Think about the scientific method. It's our best tool, right? The best tool we have for understanding the physical world, but what does it rely on fundamentally?
Observation. Testing things. Seeing them with your own eyes.
Exactly. You see a phenomenon, you test it, you measure it, you repeat it. But here's the problem. Human beings are trapped in a very specific, very narrow band of time.
Right. We weren't there for the premiere, and we haven't seen the credits roll yet.
Precisely. Were you there when the universe began?
I most certainly was not, no.
And has anyone you know come back from the dead, I mean, statistically speaking, as a verified reporter with notes and photos to give us a detailed tour of the afterlife?
No, that has not happened.
So we have a profound problem. When we try to answer origin and end using only our human intellect or our scientific observation, we had a hard limit. We cannot observe the creation of the universe because we hadn't been created yet. And we cannot observe the afterlife because, well, we aren't dead yet.
So science, our best tool, it hits a hard wall here.
It hits a hard wall. And the source actually references a verse from the Quran that speaks directly to this. It essentially states that humans did not witness the creation of the heavens and the earth, nor even their own creation.
Yeah.
So any answer that is derived solely from human intellect without any kind of external guidance is inevitably going to be a guess.
A theory, a myth. It's like trying to describe the furniture in a room you've never been inside. You can guess, but you don't actually know.
You're blindfolded. You might feel a corner of a table and guess it's a chair. You might feel the carpet under your feet and guess it's a blanket. But you don't have the full picture. You can't.
And this leads us to a really colorful section of the source material. Before explaining the Islamic answer, the source takes us on this tour of how other ancient civilizations tried to guess what was in that room. And man, human imagination it's wild.
It really is. When you don't have the data, you have to fill the gaps with story. And the stories are incredible.
Let's look at ancient Egypt. The source mentions their belief that the universe just began with primordial water, and the god Atum literally created himself out of that water. Or the other narrative of Amun, representing air and fertility.
Right, and if you think about it for a second, it makes perfect sense in their context. They lived and died by the Nile River. Their entire existence, their agriculture, their life and death, it all depended on the water and the wind. So they looked at their immediate environment and they just extrapolated a creation myth from it. The universe must be like the Nile, but bigger.
They projected their local reality onto the entire cosmos. Okay, then you go across the Mediterranean to ancient Greece. The source brings up the story of Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky.
The classic separation myth, yeah. A common theme.
Yeah, they get married, but then their son, Kronos, rebels, and it's not just a teenage rebellion, it's violent. He physically separates heaven and earth. It's dramatic, it's bloody, it's very human.
It is intensely human. It projects human family dynamics, jealousy, betrayal, power struggles onto the gods. The universe in this model was literally born out of conflict and violence.
And then we get to Hinduism. This was the one that really stood out to me in the source. The imagery is it's incredibly specific and almost psychedelic.
It's very vivid. The source mentions a few concepts like the golden egg, the Hiranyagarbha, or the image of the god Brahma.
But not just appearing out of nowhere. He emerges from a lotus flower. And that flower is growing out of the navel of another god, Vishnu. And Vishnu himself is asleep on a giant cosmic serpent, which is floating in an endless ocean of milk.
It is just incredibly vivid imagery. But the source's critique here is really crucial. It's not mocking these stories just to be dismissive or to say, look how silly they were. It's using them to illustrate that point we just made about the time wall.
Right. The point isn't about their lack of science.
No, not at all. The point is, this is what happens when you try to explain the unseen without guidance. The results can seem, at least to the modern mind, a bit erratic or, confused. The source argues that these are the inevitable results of trying to solve an equation when you are missing the most important variable. You just end up guessing based on what you know about. Lotus flowers, rivers, family fights.
So that sets the stage for the comparative approach. But before we get to the Islamic answer, the source does something really interesting. It zooms in on the specific audience the Prophet Muhammad was speaking to, the pre-Islamic Arabs, the Jahiliyyah period.
And this is a very, very misunderstood period of history.
I'll admit, I had a misconception here myself. I always sort of assumed pre-Islamic Arabia was just full of atheists or, people who worshipped rocks and had absolutely no concept of a supreme god. But the source says that's completely wrong.
It is factually incorrect, and this is a critical point. The pre-Islamic Arabs were not atheists. They absolutely believed in a supreme creator god. They even called him Allah.
Wait, so the word Allah wasn't new. The Prophet didn't introduce that name.
No, it wasn't new at all. The source uses pre-Islamic poetry as direct evidence. There's a famous poet named Labid bin Rabia who wrote lines explicitly acknowledging God, Allah, as the only eternal truth. Even more telling, the Prophet's own father, who died before the Prophet was even born, was named Abdullah.
Abdullah, which means?
Servant of Allah. You can't be named the servant of Allah if the concept of Allah doesn't already exist. It was part of their culture, part of their language.
Okay, so this is huge. If they already believed in a supreme creator god named Allah, what was the problem? Why did they need a new message? Why was there so much conflict?
The problem wasn't belief in God's existence. The source frames it as bureaucracy and divinity.
Bureaucracy and divinity. I love that phrase. Unpack that for us.
Think of it like a modern corporation. They believed God was the CEO. He was absolutely there. He was in charge. But he was way up in the penthouse office. He was too high, too distant, too busy to deal with the little guy on the factory floor.
So you can't just walk in and talk to him. You need to go through the proper channels.
Exactly. So they adopted a system of intermediaries, middlemen, gatekeepers.
The idols.
Right. They thought, we need someone to take our prayers and carry them up the chain of command for us. They worshiped the idols not necessarily as the creators of the universe, but as the regional managers who had the CEO's ear.
It's like trying to get a meeting with the CEO of a massive company, but you have to go through the assistant's intern first.
Precisely. And the source does a really cool linguistic deep dive here that I found fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
It traces the most famous idol, Hubal, which was the big idol in Mecca, the main attraction at the Kaaba back, to the word Baal.
Baal, as in the ancient deity from the Levant, the Phoenicians and Canaanites.
The very same. The source points out that this was an imported theology. The name Baalbek in modern-day Lebanon literally means Valley of the Lord, or Valley of Baal. The Arabs were merchants. They traveled constantly. They did business in the Levant. They saw these sophisticated religious practices, this Baal worship, and they thought, hey, we need some of that prestige back home.
So it was a cultural import, like importing a luxury car or a fashion trend.
Exactly. It was a classic case of cultural exchange leading to a kind of theological corruption. So the critique of the Quran, when it came, wasn't, you don't believe in God. The critique was much more pointed. It was, why are you worshiping the middleman?
The source cites a specific criticism from the Quran, doesn't it? Something like, do you call upon Baal and forsake the best of creators?
That's the one. It's an argument about efficiency and respect. Why go to the regional manager when the CEO has a well-publicized open-door policy? Why deal with all this bureaucracy when you have direct, unmediated access?
That brings us perfectly to Section 4, the Islamic model. The source frames this as complexity and simplicity. So how does this model answer those big three questions we started with? Origin, end, and purpose.
It strips away the mythology. It clears the entire desk. Question 1, origin. There is a single omnipotent creator, Allah, with perfect attributes. No sons, no daughters, no partners. He doesn't sleep. There are no golden eggs, no cosmic serpents. It's clean. Humans in this model were created from a single soul, Adam and his mate, and then they multiplied from there.
Simple, linear, no divine family drama to kick things off.
Exactly. Then, question 2, the end. Death is not the end. It's a transition. There is a resurrection, the Ba'ath, which is a literal physical reconstruction of the body. That is followed by accountability, the Hisab, leading to a final judgment. And that judgment results in either heaven or hell.
And question 3, purpose. Why are we here?
The purpose is twofold. Faith in that creator and doing good work, or Amal Salih. That is the entire function of life in this model.
Now, here is where it gets really interesting for me. The source uses this fantastic analogy from economics to explain why this model works the way it does. The concept of anchor goods.
This is a brilliant analogy. It really clarifies the whole structure. In economics, an anchor good is something absolutely fundamental, like oil. It's the baseline. If the price of oil shifts, the price of everything shifts.
Right.
Your transport costs go up, so food costs go up. Plastic becomes more expensive. Heating your home costs more. It just ripples through the entire economy.
Okay, so that's the economic idea. What's the anchor idea in the Islamic model?
The source argues very powerfully that resurrection and accountability is the anchor idea of Islam.
How so? Unpack that connection.
Well, think about it. If you believe, truly believe, that you simply die and rot, that there is nothing next of, your entire moral structure is completely different. You optimize for now. You optimize for pleasure, for power, for getting away with things in this life.
It's the YOLO philosophy. You only live once, so you have to grab everything you can.
Exactly. If this life is all there is, then self-sacrifice makes almost no sense. Why give away your money if you'll never see a return on that investment? Why die for a cause if death is just a black void? Your calculations are short-term.
But if you shift that anchor idea,
If your anchor idea is, no, I will be revived, I will stand in front of my Creator, and I will be interrogated about every single action I took, big and small, then the price of everything changes. Suddenly, the price of lying goes up. It becomes infinite. The price of oppression becomes terrifyingly high. The value of charity changes from a loss in this world to an investment in the next. Your entire worldview, your entire decision-making matrix shifts because the consequences have shifted from temporary to eternal.
so the resurrection isn't just a spooky ghost story for the end times. It's the central structural beam that holds up the entire moral system in the here and now.
Without it, the whole system collapses into meaninglessness. The logic of the good deed depends entirely and completely on the promise of the end.
But this, of course, brings us to the inevitable counter-argument. The skeptic in the room says, that's all well and good. It's a neat, clean system. But it's blind faith. You can't see God. You can't see the afterlife. It's just a fairy tale you tell yourself for comfort.
And the source tackles this head-on in the next section, the logic of the unseen. And it uses a fantastic detective analogy. It completely rejects the term blind faith. It argues for deductive reasoning.
I loved this part, the burnt room analogy.
Walk me through it. It's such a clear way of putting it.
Okay, so the source says, imagine you walk into a room, you look around, you see ash everywhere. The wood furniture is turned to charcoal. The walls are black with soot. The paint is peeling off in strips. It smells like acrid smoke. The air is still warm. Now, you didn't see the fire. You weren't there when it happened. But what do you know for a fact?
That there was a fire. It's the only logical conclusion.
Exactly. You deduce it. You connect all the seen data, the ash, the soot, the heat, to the unseen cause, which was the fire.
The source gives another example. The wet street. You go to bed, it's a clear night. You wake up, look out your window, and there are puddles everywhere. The cars are wet, the grass is soaking. You didn't see it rain because you were asleep, but you know with certainty that it rained.
And the DNA example, which is even more personal. You believe your father is your father. Most of us don't demand a DNA test every morning over breakfast. We trust the context, the relationship, the seen evidence of our family life to believe in the unseen biological connection.
And this is the core of the argument. The source posits that intelligence, true intelligence, is not just about observing facts. It's the ability to connect visible data to invisible causes. The argument is that the universe itself is the burnt room. The incredible complexity of a single cell, the perfect orbit of the planets, the fine-tuning of the laws of physics, these are the ash and the charcoal. They're the physical evidence. And so, to look at a universe that appears designed and deduce a designer is not blind superstition. It is a rational act of deduction.
So it's flipping the script. It's saying that denying the fire when you are literally standing in the ashes is actually the irrational position.
Precisely. The source argues that the refusal to see the connection is a failure of deduction, not some triumph of enlightened skepticism. It's a willful refusal to connect the dots.
This logical foundation helps explain the historical conflict we see in the next section. The source makes a really provocative point about the fight between the Prophet Muhammad and his own tribe, the Quraysh, in Mecca.
This completely changes how we view the early history of Islam. It reframes the entire conflict.
Yeah, because we often think, oh, they hated him because he told them to pray 5 times a day, or they didn't want to give up their alcohol and parties.
But the source corrects that timeline very carefully. In Mecca, for those first 13 long years, most of the rituals we associate with Islam hadn't even been revealed yet. There was no mandatory zakat, the charity tax. The punishment for alcohol wasn't there yet. Fasting the month of Ramadan wasn't instituted yet. All of that came later, in the mid and end period.
So what on earth were they fighting about for 13 years? That's a long time to argue if it's not about specific rules and regulations.
They were fighting about the anchor idea. They were fighting tooth and nail about the afterlife and accountability.
Why? Why would the Meccan elites care so much if some guy says there's a heaven and a hell? Why is that so threatening?
Because of the accountability part.
Yeah.
You have to remember, the Meccan elites, the Quraysh, they were the 1%. They were powerful. They ran the city. They oppressed the weak. They hoarded wealth. They treated people like property. Their system worked very well for them. Then the prophet comes along and says, this life is not the end. You will be brought back to life, and you will answer for every single person you hurt. You will answer for every coin you stole. That terrified them.
It's a direct threat to their power structure.
It's a check on their absolute authority. It introduces an audit they can't control. The source quotes Umar bin al-Khattab, who was a fierce opponent before he became a Muslim. He later said something to the effect of, if not for the last day, you would have seen a very different Umar. The fear of judgment is what curbs our worst impulses. If you remove that ultimate judgment, the strong will always, always eat the weak.
There is a story the source tells here about a Muslim envoy meeting the great Persian commander Rustam. This really encapsulates the why behind this conflict for me.
The narrow versus wide world is such a powerful image.
Yes. So this envoy, he's dressed simply, he's riding a small horse, and he's standing in front of the glittering, powerful Persian Empire. Rustam, the commander, asks him, why are you here? What do you people want? And the envoy says something absolutely profound. He says, we are here to move people from the tightness of this world to the expanse of the hereafter.
That phrase, the tightness of this world, is psychological gold. Because if you believe this world is all there is, it is incredibly tight, it's claustrophobic.
Because it's your only shot. There are no do-overs.
It's your only shot. If you don't get the money now, you never will. If you don't get justice now, you never will. If you get sick and die, it's a final tragedy with no redemption. And that desperation, that tightness, it creates greed. It creates a frantic, zero-sum scramble for resources.
With the expanse.
But if you believe in the expanse of the hereafter, this world becomes, well, it becomes just a waiting room. The pressure valve releases. You can endure injustice in this life because you know the final court date is already set. You can give away money now because you know it's an investment for later. The entire worldview opens up. You can finally breathe.
That really shifts the whole perspective. It moves Islam from being a list of do's and don'ts to being a kind of liberation from the psychological pressure of materialism.
Exactly. It's a way to free yourself from the tyranny of the rat race.
And speaking of do's and don'ts, the source takes a sharp turn in the next section to redefine what a Muslim actually is. It argues that we have become over-focused on the rituals and under-focused on the core belief system.
And it uses the amazing story of George, or Jarja in Arabic, to prove its point.
I love this story. It's so counterintuitive. Tell us about George.
So George was a Roman commander. This is during the Battle of Yarmouk, a massive world-changing conflict between the Byzantine Empire and the early Muslim armies. George is on the opposing side. He rides out to meet Khalid bin Walid, the famous Muslim general. They have a parley, a conversation, right there in the no-man's land between the two armies. George asks Khalid, what is this message you have? What is it you are actually fighting for? And Khalid explains the idea. One God, accountability, the purpose of life, justice. And George is convinced. He defects right there on the battlefield. He switches sides and joins the Muslim army.
Talk about a sudden and dramatic career change.
A massive one. He joins the fight, and shortly after, the battle begins in earnest, and George is killed. He dies a martyr. Now, here is the kicker. The source points out that George died before he prayed a single formal prayer. He never fasted a day of Ramadan. He never paid zakat. He didn't know the intricate rules of Sharia. He probably barely knew the name of the religion he had just adopted. Yet the consensus among scholars is that he is a person of paradise.
Because he accepted the model. He accepted the core idea.
Exactly. He accepted the worldview. He aligned his understanding of reality with the truth origin and purpose. The source argues that this is definitive proof that the core of Islam is the belief system, the worldview. The rituals are the fruits that grow from the tree, but the tree itself is the belief.
So if the roots aren't there, the fruit doesn't matter. But if the roots are there, even if you don't have time to grow the fruit, the tree itself is still considered valid and alive.
Precisely. The source also mentions Sumayya and Yasir, the first martyrs in Islam, who died in Mecca under torture. They were killed years before the detailed laws of Sharia were even revealed. Their Islam was considered perfect and valid, based purely on their acceptance of the Creator and the afterlife.
This leads us to a really practical discussion in the next section. If the core is belief, then what is the role of all these good deeds? The source presents a very realistic, almost gritty view of human nature.
It calls life a zero-sum game, which can sound a bit harsh, but it's based on observation.
And it feels true, doesn't it? We wake up hungry, we compete for jobs, we compete for status, for parking spots. Resources are, by their nature, limited.
And the source says, in this natural scramble for resources, the default human tendency is toward oppression. If I want that last loaf of bread and there's only one, my animal instinct might be to shove you out of the way to get it. If I want that promotion, my base instinct might be to lie about my coworker to get it. That is the animal self. This is where the crucial concept of taqwa comes in.
Taqwa. Okay, we hear this word a lot in Islamic contexts. It's usually translated as fear of God or piety, but the source defines it a bit differently, more practically.
The source defines it as an internal braking system, as self-restraint. It argues that good deeds aren't just about doing extra good things like charity. A huge part of it is about the ability to compete for resources without harming others. It's the ability to say, I really want that money, but I refuse to cheat to get it. I desperately want revenge on that person, but I will not cross the line of justice.
So a huge portion of what we call good deeds is actually just not doing bad things. The act of refraining is itself a good deed.
It's the don't do list. And the source highlights the mercy in this concept. It says you actually get rewarded for the bad things you didn't do. You didn't gossip today when you had the chance. That's a reward. You didn't steal that thing you could have gotten away with. Reward. You didn't lose your temper with your family. Reward. It shifts the focus from purely performative rituals to this constant internal discipline. It's about what you don't do when you think no one is watching.
That connects directly to the final section. The social imperative. The source asks this really pointed question. Can you be a good Muslim alone in a cave?
And the answer, according to this framework, is a resounding no.
Why not? I mean, if I'm in a cave, I'm not sinning, I'm praying all day meditating, I'm not hurting anyone. It sounds like the perfect setup.
But you also aren't being generous. You aren't being patient. You aren't being honest or forgiving.
Because those virtues, they require an audience. They require friction.
They require interaction. You cannot be honest if you never speak to anyone. You cannot be patient if no one is there to annoy you. The source cites the saying of the prophet that the believer who mixes with people and endures their annoyance is better than the one who isolates himself in a cave.
So the annoyance of other people is it's the gym where you build your character.
It's exactly that. Your annoying coworker, your difficult neighbor, the person who cuts you off in traffic, they are the weights you lift to build the muscle of patience. And the rituals, the prayer, the fasting, those are the training exercises for that gym. The source argues that fasting is impulse control training. You learn to say no to your own body, to hunger and thirst, so that when you are in a business meeting and you want to scream, you have that pre-built muscle memory of restraint.
It's building up the no muscle.
Right. And zakat, the obligatory charity, is training to master money. You give it away regularly to prove to yourself that it doesn't own you. You break its psychological enslavement. And the 5 daily prayers are meant to be a way to carry a spiritual state out of the mosque and into the workplace. It prevents you from becoming what the source calls a part-time Muslim.
And the source is pretty critical of the part-time Muslim, isn't it?
Very. The person who is an angel in the mosque, but a shark at work. The one who prays beautifully but then cheats their customers. The source argues this person hasn't internalized the anchor idea. They're doing the calisthenics, the prayer, but they are failing the actual sport, which is ethics in daily life. The model is broken for them because the connection between the ritual and the real-world behavior is completely severed.
It all comes back to that consistency. The model has to work across the board, not just for an hour on Friday.
It has to be integrated, or it's just a performance.
So let's just summarize where we've landed after all this. We've defined the what of Islam. The Islamic model as presented here is 1. The origin is a single transcendent creator. 2. The end is accountability and an afterlife. And 3. The purpose of this life is faith and exercising that active self-restraint, that taqwa, in society.
That's the structure. That's the core definition, stripped of all the cultural baggage.
But as the source itself concludes, we still have that nagging question from the very beginning. We know what it is now, in detail, but why should we believe it's the truth?
Why this model, and not the ancient Greek model? Why this model, and not the modern atheist model. Why this 1 out of 4,000?
And the source acknowledges that this is the cliffhanger. We have built the car, we've explained how the engine works, we've shown you the safety features, but we haven't actually taken it for a test drive yet to prove it's the fastest and most reliable car on the track.
And that is exactly what the source material promises to cover in the next discussion. The arguments for veracity. The evidence.
But the source does leave us with a final thought to chew on until then, and it goes right back to our friend George, the Roman commander on the battlefield.
It's a reflection on the nature of decision-making. George didn't have a lifetime to study theology. He didn't have a PhD in comparative religion. He didn't have time to sit and debate every single nuance for 20 years. He saw the logic of the model. One God, accountability, justice. It resonated as true, and he made a decision. The source emphasizes that the most important thing isn't just accumulating information, it's having the courage to align your worldview with what you conclude is reality before your time runs out.
Because, as we established right at the start with that time wall, none of us know when our personal end is coming.
The timeline is unknown. For any one of us, the end could be tomorrow.
A sobering thought, but also an empowering one, in a way. It puts the ball directly in your court. You have the data. What do you do with it? We are going to wrap it up there for today. This has been a deep, deep dive into the definition and the internal structure of the Islamic worldview.
It's always fascinating to get under the hood of an idea system that has shaped and continues to shape billions of human lives.
Absolutely. Thank you for guiding us through the logic, the history, and the philosophy behind it all. And thank you to you, the listener, for sticking with us. As always, keep asking the big questions. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Take care.